Heading out for a paddle. Wind is forecast to gust to 49 knots. I don't think it'll get that high, but we'll see. To get underway, we decided to go from this gravel boat ramp. It's a nice, easy place to launch from, where the water gets kind of gradually deeper, almost like a beach. It just makes things easier with the wind in the waves. So this is the Muldoon boat ramp. Before going out kayak sailing in any winds, you want to be confident that you can handle your boat in those winds without the sail. So that means you want to be able to be certain that you can paddle across the wind and steer effectively. You want to be sure that you're strong enough to paddle into the wind, and even paddling downwind, steering can be a little bit challenging. So I've got a skeg and a rudder to help me out on this boat.
I like this part of the paddle.
Hey?
I like this part of the paddle. We're just scooping along.
I'm going to swim before this day's out, I know it.
I got a good chance too.
Hey?
I think I have a good chance too.
What I did was I went over to the windward side of the river so I could get a little bit of lee from the trees to set up the rig. The rig is a carbon fiber pop-up rig by Falcon Sails. And the reason I wanted a little bit of a lee to get the rig set up is I didn't want to, have the rig halfway up or be part way through the process of getting things kind of the way I wanted them, and then get hit by a 40 knot gust and knocked over or something of that nature. This here is just really fantastic sailing. The wind is kind of from a great direction. It's what you'd call a broad reach. The wind is coming over my left shoulder, which the boat's fairly easy to handle on that point of sail. There isn't too much heeling or leaning over. You can pretty well compensate for the gust just by leaning upwind a little bit, and it's fast. As I get further across the river, I'm required to change my point of sail a little bit. I changed to what's called a beam reach. So that's where the wind is basically coming directly from your side. So it's coming from my left-hand side. And also it's increasing. The wind's getting fairly strong. So in order to sail with the wind coming onto the beam like that, the main thing you do is you lean upwind. You lean with your body upwind. However, when it's strong like this, I use my paddle. I put the downwind side of my paddle blade onto the surface of the water, and it works kind of like a foil to brace so that you don't blow over in the big gusts. The paddle kind of holds you upright. I'm just kind of having some fun here, skimming along the shoreline. But it's worth noting that generally speaking, when you're sailing, you want to avoid sailing close to a lee shore. That's where the shore is downwind from you, because if you kind of lose control of the boat, then you can get blown into the shoreline. But I've got pretty good control over the boat, and the scenery's neat close to shore, so I was just kind of skimming along and enjoying the scenery. A little bit of a rush sailing that close to shore as well. You can see here I sail into this little wetland area. I'm in very little water here. The water's only about 12 inches deep, I guess. You can see actually in a couple of places there's some grass sticking above the surface. At one point, my boom actually hits a very tall piece of grass. It's lots of fun. The boat handles well in that shallow water. It draws less than 6 inches with the skeg and the rudder down. The only problem is you can't get your paddle really deep into the water. But yeah, the boat can do it. So I get a little bit further from shore here, and I'm able to get back fully onto that broad reach where the wind's coming kind of over my left shoulder. Really fast point of sail, and I think it might have been here where I saw my best speeds of the day. So in terms of what kind of speed I was getting, this is with no paddling at all, this is just sailing. I was hitting close to 7 knots. So 7 knots is, kind of 8 miles per hour ballpark and just shy of 13 kilometers per hour. So it's moving right along in a kayak. It's lots of fun. I would say that was kind of the peak speed was about 7 knots. Pretty consistently I looked down and I saw 6.5 knots, 6.5 knots. So I'm sailing really pretty fast here. I'm sailing almost straight downwind. What I'm doing in the gusts is I'm going straight downwind, but in the lulls I'm rounding up a little bit. So rounding up means I'm turning the boat a little bit into the wind and sailing across the wind a little bit more. And the reason I'm slowly working my way to port is there's a point of land jutting out in front of me, and there's a fairly significant amount of wind pushing me towards that point of land, and there's also the current from the river is pushing me towards that point of land. So that's what I do, is I kind of work my way to port, then a gust will come up, I'll sail downwind, lull, I'll turn back upwind a bit. So the plan was to kind of just work my way to port as necessary, and I thought I'd be able to clear the point of land, no problem. However, I played a little bit too close to the edge, and what ended up happening was before I was able to round the point, I got hit by some pretty powerful gusts. Which isn't surprising. They were forecast, and you do get changes in the wind close to land. So it became apparent to me that I was not going to be able to successfully round the point of land, and I was going to get blown into shore at some point. So what I did to avoid that was I dropped the sail rig to the deck. It's easy, it's just one line, I pop it out. The mast fell to the deck, and I wasn't getting blown anymore. And I was able to paddle, and I actually grabbed onto a dock that was jutting out, and I used that dock to kind of swing me around and take a little bit of a break.
Alright, we're doing pretty well. This last section I didn't even sail because I was just kind of blowing downwind at 3.5, 4 knots. That's the river there. The boat's handling well.
I'm out on some much more open water here, and for the most part the wind was more consistent because it wasn't bouncing off the trees, but when it gusted, the gusts were really powerful. So I'm sailing downwind, and as you can see, when you're sailing straight downwind, there's a possibility of accidentally jibing. That's when the boom swings across the boat to the other side, and it does take a little bit of paying attention to make sure that you don't flip the other way when you jibe. So basically you're leaning upwind, you're using your paddle to brace, the boom comes across, and all of a sudden you're leaning in the same direction that the boat is being pressed over. So you got to be quick, changing sides and bracing on the other side when that boom changes sides. The other thing that's going on here is the gusts are so strong. They're actually pushing the bow of the boat underwater, and the result being that the stern's coming up out of the water. That's where my rudder and my skeg are, my control surfaces. So to counteract that bow being pushed under the water, I'm leaning back to try and get that rudder and skeg to bite by leaning my weight back. Okay, so there's a quick demonstration of kayak sailing in high winds. It was a lot of fun. We were a long way from done at this point. We went about another 7 miles, but a lot of that was paddling upwind. That was just the direction of the river change, not the direction of the wind. So, yeah, we had a great day. That's all I have. Thank you.